Yahoo, Prof here, and we just finished up work. I probably can't see anything. Doesn't matter. I'm not the one you want to see. This right here is what you want to see. Not this guy. This is the cowling for their desk fan from Noctua. That's actually going inside a Chibi PC, or at least we're going to try to make that happen. And they actually don't necessarily say you can't do that with it. It's like amplifier, ideal for boosting performance, desk and room ventilation. Enables these fans to create strong focused beams, situations where fans that blow across the room or bigger spaces. I'll try it as that, but I'm going to try to put it in a PC as well. That's not why we're here, though. What's this box? I never opened this box. Oh, crap. This is what happens when I get busy. But these are what we're going to be dealing with. The NF-A14 by 25. And here's a 2-pack. As you can see, that is a 2-pack. Then we have a 1-pack. Ooh, and it goes on the floor. We then also have here, this should be 5 by 140 millimeter fan grills, Noctua version. We have 3 right there, and you're like, why'd you buy 5 then? It was either a 2-pack or a 5-pack, and 2 2-packs is more than a 5-pack. So, and then we also have the 200 millimeter grill specifically for the Noctua, so I can get rid of the generic silver one that I have. Now, what do you mean generic silver one? What are you talking about? Like, we should already know what this is for. Well, I've talked about it before, but the home theater PC was running the 5800X3D. That's where we did all of our testing for it. Right here, it's not unplugged yet. I was doing some measuring for jamming a bigger GPU in there. Right now, it's a 3060 Ti EVGA. Turns out I need 300 millimeters to fit what I want to fit, and we got just barely that's gonna be. So we'll see. Right now, the 3060 Ti goes to just below that the C14 Noctua cooler. If you notice, though, there's no fan on top. That is because the fan is actually on the underside, which is an optional way to mount it. All right. So, however, sadly, this had a 5800X3D. We actually dropped it down to a 5700X3D. Reason being is with the 5800X3D, it was, I don't want to say thermal throttling. It was not fully boosting. It would drop one boost, boost tier after, doing 10 minutes of stuff, heavy load kind of stuff. And then it would start to go a bit like 1 or 2 more, because it's getting really close. Basically, from what I found, that is a 140 millimeter single fan tower cooler. You could do 2 if you had brackets and stuff. Had the same thing in Chibi PC. Chibi PC, as you may or may not go, also got solved. That is a D15 Gen 2. Yes, we have clearance issues with the front fan, so I'm going to have to fix that. See that? I can't put the side on with that sticking out. This is also the build where I'm thinking that I can get that thing right here to get kind of like past this bundle of cables and shove air that way. We'll see if we hit this BioStar 37 that's down here or not, but that fixed it. The 5800X3 that's in here, even though it's on a B350 motherboard where it might not be being used to its most, it's at least happy, very happy. So I can't do that here. You may or may not be able to see by the clearance, but there is none. That is why I have a top-down downdraft cooler, and instead of putting the fan on the top, which is where you get the best performance, it's underneath. Also, there's 2 140 millimeters in the front, and those are actually outtakes. You're like, outtakes? Yeah, that's because there's a 200 millimeter intake on the top. So what we have is 200 millimeter intake down onto the GPU, sucking it in, exhausting it out, down onto the CPU, sucking it down, exhausting out, and then we have a rear intake, sucks it in the back, and then all the hot air gets pushed out the front. So it's kind of reverse airflow from what you guys are thinking, but the main intake is that 200 millimeter that it's up top that's filtered. So that is why we can exhaust out the front, because we're not sucking air in and across, we're sucking air down and pushing it out. But what the thing is here is the 2-pack, these are offset by 50 RPM, I think. 25 RPM. Squiggle. And what that does is when you have two fans like this side by side, right? Basically they should be 25 RPM, at least 25 RPM apart, so that they don't synchronize, meaning they don't go all go at 400 RPM and then they amplify each other. So that is why you buy the 2-pack. It is also cheaper to buy a 2-pack rather than $40 a fan. I think it was like 76, I want to say, for the 2-pack. So instead of 80, so you save a little bit. And then you get that purposefully mismatched RPM. Then we have the third fan. That's the one that's going on the tower over there, right? Now we'll see when we get to that 2-pack there, if one of them's labeled as the lower fan. Hopefully it is, because what I'm going to do then is make sure that on that side where there's that fan and that fan, those are not the same, right? So the different one, if the normal speed, I don't want normal, low, or normal, high. I want normal, low, normal, or normal, high, normal, that sort of thing. And I don't know if they're labeled. They must be to some extent, because they do mention in the guide for these 3 fan configurations as well. And you don't want the 2 similar fans next to each other. So that's what we're gonna try to do here. If you guys are wondering, they do the same sort of thing for the D15 Gen 2 there. Those are offset as well, so you don't get that resonance going on. Sadly, that front one's gonna have to change to a A12 by 25 because, and I know it's because of the RAM. However, I'm not buying new RAM for a system running a B350 motherboard. And I have a Noctua fan I can throw in there. I also need another one for the front that's 120 millimeter, unless I use an adapter. I just thought about that now. But I think, yeah, if you can see that red LED, that's an SSD, because the SSD normally goes on the back side of that motherboard. I have like an extension, because what would happen is it would just cook itself back here. Normally this has panels on, and it goes underneath here. So it would just cook itself, right? That is why I extended it this way, and it just clears the 120 millimeter front fan. So I don't think, because otherwise I have like 140 to 120 millimeter brackets and stuff like that, where I've used that in the past to either size up or size down fans. Yeah, surprisingly, that's been like literally my most reliable PC. It's been in two different ITX cases now. It was originally a 1700, and now it is a 5800 X3D, same motherboard. Originally 16 gigs of RAM, back before FlareX existed. Then once they made 32 gigs of 2933 FlareX, because you couldn't do, though you could do 3200 on first gen Ryzen, you couldn't do 3200 or 32 gigs. That's been in there. So same RAM, same motherboard, and we've went through 1700 to a 3900 to a 59 or 5800 X3D, and that had a U14. It's the one that's going to be in my backup server, and it also did the same thing that this one did, where unless you max out all the fans in the computer, you start dropping boost tiers, right? 5700 X3D also fixed that because it's a lower, so there are some advantages. People are like, oh, but it's slower. Yes, that also means it puts out less heat, at least in my case. So even though it's slower overall when properly cooled, like by a decent margin. When the 5800 X3D is throttling and the 5700 X3D is not throttling, there's much less margin, like 1 to 3%, instead of like 5 to 7% or something like that. And that is in CPU focused benchmarks, not like video game focused benchmarks. In video game focused benchmarks, there's no noticeable difference, at least with the 3060 Ti that's in there. This may become a 3080 Ti because I just bought a 4070 Ti for the, well, I don't really buy it for my desktop, but I was doing some math. It may just squeeze into GPC over here. Like, if you put the ass end in first over here. We did this when I did Shane's build to test his thing. I put his graphics card in here because this is what I was using as my desktop at the time. I'm like, I will know if the card's good or not by throwing it in there. But because Zotac cards have a round ass, if you put the ass in here and actually pivot it that way, it'll snap in, even though it's wider than even though like the 300 millimeter cards are wider than the case, because they have a round butt, you can kind of insert them and snap them that way. So I was thinking 4070 Ti in there, but looking at benchmarks, 3080 Ti, 4070 Ti kind of trade blows. Newer games, 4070 Ti wins. Also, I get my AV1 encoding. And I was like, oh, I could put the AV1 encoding in here, right? Because I use this actually more than my desktop lately for gaming, watching anime, that sort of stuff. But then I did some math and I'm like, well, I got the 3080 Ti and I really don't use more than 3 monitors anymore. I might use 4 eventually, but my end setup of my desktop upstairs is looking like it might be 3. 2 LG dual ups left and right, and then the 32-inch OLED. And I've gotten really used to at work having 3 as well. And at most, I've actually been considering putting a TV up on the wall, like way up there, and that's what I'd throw YouTube on then. That'd be my 4th display, right? It wouldn't be anything like amazing by any means. But, you know, throw something up on the wall, and that would give it, like, you know, like that would be the YouTube monitor, would actually be the wall TV. That's still only 4, right? Also, with my 4K more than 120 hertz monitors, 30 series and older have an issue with that where they can only do 2 at a time. Right now, I have 3 of those plugged into my desktop. Now, that's a fine thing because I actually don't have 3 because I have my 3050. So one of them goes off to, actually what I ended up doing, I think, is main card just has the OLED. 3050 has the 2 4K 144 Hz IPSs plugged in, right? So that's how I solved that. But 40 series doesn't have that issue. Even though it doesn't have DisplayPort 2.0 or 2.1 or whatever it is, it does have more bandwidth for the DisplayPort ports. That's something you guys should know. Just because you have 4 ports on the back of your graphics card doesn't mean you can use them all. Or if you have more than 4 ports, doesn't mean you can use them all. Also, that 4th display is considered like an auxiliary display. This goes back to NVIDIA Surround, and it always causes funky shit to go down. That's why I usually add in another graphics card. In this case, I'm actually interested in possibly sticking in one of the Intel cards as my secondary card to get that acceleration. I don't know if they can use QuickSync. If they can, I don't know why I don't already have one in there as my secondary. It'll get a little bit messy with running multiple graphics drivers, but I already have to run NVIDIA AMD at the same time, and my laptops already run NVIDIA Intel, so I don't really see that as too much of an issue. But we're going to do some hopscotching. 3080 and 3050 are going to come out of the desktop. 3080 Ti is going to, or 3080 Ti is going to go in here. Since it pushes 4K 120, no problem on my desktop, which is actually 144 and now even 240. Usually I aim for like 100 is my minimum, but I aim for 120 plus when I do games. It has no problem. So I'll finally be able to do like crank, ratchet, and crank ratchet and clank. Whereas the 3060 Ti at 4K, you're starting to do like medium if you still want RTX, or you're going like, you're like, I'm not gonna bother with the RTX stuff, stuff like that. 3060 Ti then is gonna go into Chibi PC instead of 3070. You're like, that's a downgrade, right? But that's a BioStar graphics card. That's an EVGA. And then the 3050 is going to go in Dry Bones, which is under there, which at least right now only has, Dry Bones is under there. It has a 1650, an MSI one. And I'd rather just get everything baselined 30 series. Like I said, since I really don't use more than 3 monitors now, and if I do a fourth, it's probably going to be like a TV up on the wall or something, or like a mini display below. I have that really skinny one I bought off of AliExpress. So that's going to get tossed around. But before then, what we need to do is get these fans in. Why is this video about the fans? Why am I taking out good A14s, NF-A14s, and putting in brand new NF-A14 Gen 2s? Well, these have so much better performance. Hopefully speaking, talking with Noctua, this should make up my performance difference. So that thing does not boot turbo throttle. It doesn't do the, if you're running the X3D parts like having a very consistent thing, right? So if you're getting up near, remember, what do you want to say? I'm trying to remember if it's like 95C or 90C is the limit for normal 5000 series. X3D is lower. It's 5 or 10 degrees lower, right? So what happens is, because it's lower, and actually X3D actually has more heat it puts out. Even though its TDP may not be as high, right? It actually has more heat it puts out. I'm guessing because of the X3D bits in there or whatever, right? Like, it's physically just hotter. So not only is the TDP lower, but the heat it's putting out is higher. Because your thermal design is not your temperature, that's how much watts it takes, right? Basically, so like it puts out more heat for that, right? So in your temperature, max temp is lower that you can have. So you get up there faster because you're already there, right? But then X3D doesn't like dipping, right? And then once you dip once, because you already dipped because you're on the edge of your temperature, you start going like this. Now, normally on a normal CPU, that's just what it does, right? X3D does not like that. Your frame times will suffer. So you need more cooling. But we went over. That is the best cooler, the C14. This might be like an updated one too. But the C14 is the best cooler that fits in this setup that I have for the HTPC. There is not enough height to do a tower cooler. Also, it would like completely mess with my airflow configuration. Like I said, we effectively have push-pull on this because there is under here a 200 millimeter fan blowing down on both those cards. Like, so if anything, this is better than most places. And like I said, if I max 100% all these fans, if you look though, there's a pair of 80 millimeters down here on the back. I have like a 2.5 inch hard drive hot swap. There's 40 millimeters on the back of there. I almost have every size because there's a 120 in the back of here. I almost have every size of Noctua fan in this build. I want to put 60s here on the vent here. And you're like, well, why would you want to do that? Because I want intake on this side, 4 of them, boom, 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 and then 4 exhaust on that side, boom, 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 to get airflow going across the chassis. Because in my IQ config, I pulled out, there should be a separator like that right there. Had to pull it out to fit the computer. Same thing for the receiver. I love it. It looks a bit dusty. I'll deal with that later. So I still need to do the 60 mils, but otherwise we have 40s, 80s, 120s, 140s, 200s, all in this thing. Every header for fans is used. And you're like, oh, that's easy because like 5 fans you're used. No. Each header in here is used for a different size fan. Yeah, and that's why I actually need different headers. Normally I would not want different headers. I don't want to see different headers. I don't want to think about different headers. I want one header. But that is also when you put all the same fans in the same build, right? That's what I try to do. Or maybe like sometimes you have to have that rear 120, right? So 140s everywhere else and then a rear 120. That's not too bad. But in this case, I have like 5 different size fans, which is why I need the different headers. Because they all have different RPMs. They all have different minimums. The smaller fans generally have higher percentage minimums, as in like they only go down to say 30%, not 20%. And the big old 200 millimeter, he goes way down low because he's got a lot of I don't know, momentum. I'm sure because the fan blade's bigger, it wants to keep spinning, etc., etc. So yeah, what I'm hoping with this though is that the updated 140 millimeter fans, especially the one on the heatsink, is efficient enough where on my, I mean, if you're hearing a computer, it's not this one. It's probably the server right now that's in back there that's running our router, because it's like a 1U server that I haven't controlled the fans on. It's dead silent. You can see like under normal use, and I even have it set up to where the GPU does not kick on even when it's playing back anime, and that's with MadVR and all that sort of. So it has a load, right? Fairly heavy load, in fact. But it's not getting hot enough to need, with airflow in the case and the 200 millimeter downdraft and the 140 exhausts, it does not need kick the fans on. Just doing like, and you're just like, oh, it's just video playback. If you guys know what MadVR is, it's like the inverse of a game. So a game, remember, you try to get as much FPS as possible. The MadVR, when you render a video, you try to make the video look as beautiful as possible in the amount of time you have to render a frame. So you want, like say if you have 40 milliseconds to render that frame, you want to take up as much as you can, because then it's going to make it's going to look better. Especially when you're scaling up your DVDs to your 4K 65-inch TV. And you're like, DVDs, yes. A lot of anime is DVD. Even think about it this way, even Blu-rays, that's still a 1080p to 4K, like a 4x upscale. Easy upscale to do, it turns out. Which means we can turn on more gubbins because it's a straight 4x upscale, so we can turn on more filtering, just like in your games, except the reverse. We have to do 24 FPS, so we get time to do it. Depending on what you're doing. You might have a higher frame rate, but it's 24 or 30. Very rarely do you get 60 frames per second content or higher. And there's stuff you can toggle, so you can have multiple settings and stuff like that. But yeah, so usually it's on right now, but you can't tell. And ideally, that's where it's at, or only like you should not be able to hear it over the nice late 70s era Pioneer speakers. Eventually we'll have some Atmos up here and some surrounds back there. I have all the stuff for it. It's just been a whole thing here. And yes, of course, by the way, that second card in there, that's 10 gig. Of course the home theater PC is 10 gig. Why wouldn't it? So yeah, let's get it working and get these new fans and Noctua fans there. I am going to shut it down first. I just had it pulled out while it was running because I needed to measure the GPUs to see what would fit where, when, how, that sort of thing. Let me know how you would do that upgrade. If you had desktop's got a 3080 Ti and a 3050, which I may or may not need anymore because I seem to only really use anything over 3 monitors for me. Like I use 3. Like working with less than 3 is hard, and 2 of those ideally 4K. The vertical one on the left can kind of be whatever. And my middle one is a 16:9. I'd prefer if the other ones weren't, because I prefer taller screens. Like BenQ just came out with a 3x2, or you have the LG Dual Up, which is almost a 1x1. So I really only need a single GPU in there now. So 3080 Ti, 3050 in there, paired, both EVGA, beautiful. They match my build with them. Awesome. Then we have our 3060 Ti in here. In Chibi PC, we have a 3070. In Dry Bones, our repair PC, we got a 1650. Yep, the non-Super, non-Ti, base 1650. That is actually the one that is based off of the previous Titan. So not the Titan XP, it's like the Titan Z? Or the Titan... It's the weird one that only came to Enterprise and Volta. Maybe the Titan V for Volta. Trying to remember. But it's the basically the one that predates 16/20 series. Like it's kind of like the first gen of that. The first gen RTX, tensor cores, that sort of stuff. That's what the 1650 is actually based off of. So it actually has a different media engine in there. That's specifically why I bought it. So I don't think that'll leave my collection of GPUs for usage. Maybe it'll go in one of the servers or something temporarily. But it's a unique card. The fact that it has the media engine of a much higher end card. And I've actually installed 2 in people's systems before. Because of that. In that era, if you guys are wondering, only the 2080 and 2080 Ti had dual like decode encode engines. Nothing below did. So that was one reason why you might go like 2080 or even 2080 Ti like I did at the time, depending on what you're doing. 1650 is weird in that way, in that, and this is like base launch 1650. It got weird. There are a bunch of different 1650s. Even if you ignore Super and Ti, there's different memory ones, which are completely different graphics cards. So that should be the good one. You know, hard to validate, but it is an MSI, and thus it needs to leave my systems, unlike these beautiful EVGA things. The Biostar over there, only picked up because got it on a song, banger of a deal. Same thing with the current, going with Zotac. They're kind of like my go-to at the moment, because they actually make a reasonably sized graphics card. Think about it. 4070 Ti is only slightly bigger than this 3060 Ti, which is a rarity. Most of the 4070 Ti's like exceed on the Torrent Compact. It's a 330 millimeter limit on your graphics card length. A lot of the 4070 Ti's exceed that. I know you don't have to go down to 2 fans. You just have to make it a reasonable size. So hopefully this guy gets more cooling, and it might get more grunt in a bit here. As like I said, I've been using this more and more, and I mean, when you got a TV like that and a chair like that just got refinished, in a granny kitty like that over there, that's Gertrude. And Paisley is probably knocked out in the other room here. That's no, I don't know where Paisley went. Anyway, she's knocked out right there in my bed. Oh, we'll have to find her. Let's get going. Alright guys, so we got some help here from Gertrude. Gertrude Filia. She went in the little IKEA house there. Gonna do the front ones first. I have to take the front of the case off, which is abysmal. Alright, so we got the front off. Where'd I put it? Over there. I blew it out. There you go, there's the front. Pulled the fans out. Didn't decable manage them. They're still sitting there like that over there. Like that over there. Come on. Like that. See? Because they were just tied up right along this edge here. Luckily the CPU fan was just literally plugged into CPU fan 1. These front 2 are plugged into CPU fan 2. Now if needed, because these 3 are all the same fan, right? And they will be right there. We could put them all into CPU fan 1 with no problem. This was just easy for cable management because I could just pluck it out of this one header here for the ones in the front, and then this guy I didn't even cable manage it. It just went right down there. tucked underneath. Because here's the fan from under there. It basically just slides under there perfectly. Just clears this right angle 24 pin right there. And, that's where the GPU is. I did have to get this out because it's such a tight fit. I took one of these craft sticks. You can use a chopstick as well. And you got to get down in between the back plate of the GPU and press the release there, kind of like that. You can use also a spudger. Use the nylon or plastic ones. Don't use a metal spudger. Don't try and use your screwdriver. Besides your screwdriver being conductive, if you slip, you stab the motherboard. Let's just say this board itself may even have wounds. In this case, if you see that says P3.00, that's actually the BIOS chip. ASRock, why'd you put it right next to the thing that people are likely to stab? Yeah, that's the TPM power, so that's definitely the BIOS chip, because that's the... Wow. You could very easily slip off that and just stab your BIOS chip. But yeah. This is just like a wooden craft stick. Say with chopstick, that's what Paul's Hardware recommends. I was like, I don't have chopsticks. But I did have, I use these for like mixing epoxy or little pots of paint, that sort of stuff. They're dirt cheap, couple dollars at Walmart, gets you a ton of them. So this was specifically this way with the cable coming out this way, and you're like, why is that? That's so I can actually get at it. This build is like everything exactly fits, and yes, that was me. And yes, I cut a perfectly sized hole. And if you notice this, I thought it might be stuck to the front because Cooler Master loves doing that. But no, it was actually retained here, and I was smart. I see you don't glue your modified USB 3C 3.0 header. You don't glue that to the front case, because that's got to come off when you do stuff like this. The filter for this is also in there. Well, there's Paisley, by the way. She was still in our wood stick. You mount it to here, and that way when you take the front of the case off, you don't take the ports with it. So seeing the things that it's put in really, really well. Use super glue to temporarily hold it, and then filled it in with hot glue. Doesn't move. I do have the audio jacks plugged. They're actually off on the back as well. Because it's a home theater PC. I do not need audio jacks. At least, actually, I did plug it in. I guess maybe I thought I was going to use it on the home theater PC for some reason. These nice big buttons are good. The LEDs in here are blinding. So there's actually tape over the front. I have yet to figure out a way to, like, frost them or something. So there's just some black electrical tape. With just enough, because the LEDs are, like, that long. Right, on both of these, and at the heart rate going ping 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 when I'm watching a movie, no bueno. So I made it so it's just a tiny little sliver, so you can see it if you look at it, but there's these little tiny LEDs in here too. Those are fine. There's actually a way to turn them off. I may do that on the back at some point, but they're fine. These being big, and like the power LED is like this big. Like you'd be like, oh, that's the hard LED. It's not that big. Yeah, well, the actual like window for it is big, and that's what diffuses it, right? So covered that up. Maybe I can actually put something over this actual LED. We'll have to see here. But first things first, this fan's getting replaced. Then the front two, then the grill on that guy. This one does not have a grill. There's not enough clearance on the bottom to do that. See, that's where it goes, right under there. And technically it's more efficient to put it on top. You can even see a little dip for the hub where it's supposed to be on top and push. But we have that behemoth up there. So we kind of have a push-pull going on. Maybe not with as much pressure, but man, oh man, do we have airflow. And that's what you really need if you're going for low noise, is you want airflow over everything. And that's where we get this as well. Is it's basically that 200 millimeters just hucking air down, and you're like, what case is this? It's a Cooler Master XB. Is it a good case? No. Did I want hot swaps? Yes, it has hot swaps. I would have had to add those myself. It has 5.25 inch bays. I need at least one 5.25 inch bay and at least one hot swap. And I could have done that if these weren't here, 5.25 inch hot swap. But this case already had them, right? And then I have four. These hard drives are actually at a Chibi PC. They are 2 terabyte WD blue drives. You can see the little blue thing there. Chibi PC used to have 750 gig black drives, and that was the max you could get in a 2.5 inch hard drive. In the black, like the fast 7200 RPM ones. I still have, I think, 2 of those still alive, but once a lot of those started dying, I think I was down, like I had 5, because when you're a raid, you always have an extra one. So I was down to 2, and I couldn't get them anymore. Like 2 without errors, basically. So I ended up going with these WD Blue 2 terabytes, which got me a lot more space. Turns out, though, they're actually SHM drives, shingled magnetic recording. And in Chibi PC, I was using that as my editing array. I'd use it as a RAID 10. And even then, though, even in RAID 10, because they're SHM drives, I couldn't edit 4K footage off of them because they weren't even doing because they're 2.5 inch drives, 5400 RPM SHM drives. I think they do 80 megabytes per second sustained or something. Now, all I use them for in here is, you see this Ultra HD Blu-ray drive? Yeah, it's 4K Blu-ray. And it is old enough that it has the firmware that you can read them without having an Intel system of certain generations, etc. So those DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray go onto here. And there's plenty of bandwidth to do that. I was running this actually in a storage spaces parity config. No boy, no. No boy, no. I want to say we're getting down to 8 megabytes per second, or under 10 at times. Like, especially with the ReFS on there, with the SHM 5400 RPM drives, no. So recently I pulled everything off because I'd mostly cleared it off. I've also used this as temporary backups too, because I can huck a drive, and you're like, why are you doing that on your PC? Well, sometimes the repair PC isn't available or is down. Now that's been fixed, so I should be doing that less, but I have done that before where I got a nice array here that's redundant. I can chuck data on there from a hard drive. I got a backup or something. No problem. But yeah, recently went to RAID 10 still in storage spaces, and we're actually getting better performance than a single drive would get now. Huzzah! Still using ReFS because if you have Enterprise Pro for workstations, apparently on 24H2, ReFS is coming back down to Pro again, maybe even Home. It was in Windows 10 prior to 20H2, or 20H2 might have been the last one, unless you had Pro for workstations. It's been on Enterprise for Windows 11 as long as I've run it. So normal users will get it. And anytime you're doing some sort of array or parity in Windows, and you don't need to run software out of it, because some software does not like non-NTFS file systems. Just especially games don't like that. ReFS, because it's similar to ZFS, as in it'll tell you if something's corrupted, and you want that with multiple drives like this. So this is actually great because, and I actually use all 7 of 8 SATA ports in here. I think I did have a plan for the last one as like an eSATA port. You're like, eSATA? Yeah. You can do SATA hot plug, so it could be an eSATA. I do have some older devices like that. These are for stuff stored on bare hard drives. I can huck them in. Super handy. You just pop this out, throw it in there. This is toolless. You can see little pegs there. So, like, for my use, this case is amazing. It's kind of a shit case. It's built like garbage. The panels don't fully fit up correctly. It's built like your, maybe not 2006, 2007, more like 2010 to 2012 era cases. It has not changed. But I wanted to get that big boy 200 millimeter in here. and it gets that downdraft config. You can still see a little spritz on the heatsink here. That was from when the washer leaked through the floor. Yeah, you might be able to see like a little stain right there. It got really close to my TV. That light's actually still dead. I still have to replace it. It poured through the floor, and a little bit got in here. Very, very minor. Just let it dry up. It was happy. Hey, look at that. We already upgraded. See, it's the black. If you guys are wondering why I use the black CPU mount, it's so I can tell that I upgraded it. People are like, oh, but the black one doesn't match your heatsink. I'm like, yeah, if you look, it's the Torx and it's the offset mount. Now, in this case, I was not able to offset it. Why? Because the top PCIe slot on the ASRock Extreme 4 X570 board is the very top slot is the graphics card, meaning I cannot offset the cooler down any because you saw I don't know if you actually saw it, but I basically have to use this little thin stick to press the GPU. There's no way we can get this down 7 millimeters. Not happening. I don't want to call it like a downside. I'm trying to remember. I think on the Extreme 4, the big thing that you got over the Steel Legend, I actually bought the Steel Legend originally, is you're literally paying, like it goes from like 160 to 220 just to get that USB-C header that's awkwardly placed in the corner of the board right there. But as you can see, I wanted that. So I grafted it onto the case. There were some other benefits. Originally, I did have a B550 Steel Legend for this because the B550 board was actually better. The other thing I didn't know at the time is normally B550 boards are not compatible with 2600 CPUs. And you're like, oh, this is a 5700, right? But originally, it had the 2600 in it. I'm trying to remember where that CPU actually came from. That CPU's been in like every build around here, basically. I think I traded for it, actually, thinking back. Or I might have got it on a banger of a deal. It's still around here. Actually, no, it isn't. It's my grandparents' PC now, because they had a 1400, I want to say, and that couldn't go to Windows 11. So they finally got the 2600. But 2600 actually was in Chibi PC for a while. Then I found out 6 cores wasn't enough for like being a secondary editing rig. Then it went into the repair PC. No, it went here first. Then this got the 5800X3D. Then the 2600 went into the repair PC. That also got an X570 board then. Because the B550, unless you have a very specific one, some B550 boards that are made for OEMs, like SI integrators, can support the 2600 CPU. It's also confusing because there's a 2600G, I think, that does work, but it's integrated graphics version 1. Very weird. B550, though, in general, incompatible with the second generation 2000 series of AMD Ryzen. So I had to upgrade to the X570, and then I was just going to get the Steel Legend again, right? Because it's a good priced performance board. I think they've gotten rid of that now from ASRock, but in like sort of the not Ryzen, not Zen 4, Zen 5, you know, like that 7000, 9000, the 5000 and older, the Steel Legend was a good priced board. But I couldn't do it because the X570 Steel Legend didn't have the USB-C, and I'd already done all this for the other board. And nowadays I plug in the USB-C more than the other USB ports. So that's something to keep in mind. And this by far was the cheapest board. I also knew I would need an X4 slot for a 10 gig card. This is an Intel X550. That is what you want. I used to muck around with the Aquantia 10 gig cards. Do not bother. Buy those used. You can get an Intel card, X550 card. You have to be very, very careful. If you guys need tips and tricks, hit me up either in the description of the video, especially over on Discord. I can explain it. But there are tons of knockoffs of it or remanufacturers of it that are fakes, basically. And they're all over. You'll see stacks of cards, and people will have them in brand new anti-static blister packs. Those are old. They're old enough that enterprises are kicking them out of use, right? people should not have brand new ones just stacked up everywhere. That is not a thing. There's also a certificate of authenticity on the back. Needs to have that. There are even fake certificates. You got to be very careful what you look at. The heatsink is a dead giveaway. Not having the certificate is a dead giveaway. How the stickers are made, dead giveaway. But you got to keep an eye out, because you'll be like, oh, it's a great deal, and it's actually a fake one. You actually want ones that are a little bit older, because they're easier to tell that they're actually real. These things are dead reliable. You just got to update the firmware, which is a bit of a pain in the ass, because it has to be done via command line. But once that's done, you're good. You just install it. Actually, it's the same drivers that if you have a built-in Intel network card, same drivers. So this has a 1 gig NIC onboard Intel, I believe, because they didn't go to Realtek till the 2.5 gig on the B550s. So it's only 1 gig Intel on here, and that uses the same driver. So easy peasy. But I need the X4 slot as well, right? And a lot of boards would dock the X16 to make an X8. I don't need that. I'm not going to run a second graphics card in here. It's not a thing. I only need an X4 slot. Benefit of X570 as well, guys. You get all 8 of your SATA ports, and if you do put a second M.2, it's not like B550, where you actually lose SATA ports 5 and 6. So in B550, basically 4 ports per controller, right, like that. So on B550, which has 6 ports, if you put in a second M.2, you knock out ports 5 and 6. So that was another thing I was running into, was on B550, I could have done it with six ports there, right? I would have just not hooked up one of these hot swaps, because I really only needed one hot swap. Or I would have done 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that, and then I could have used the second M.2. X570, because of how there's a chipset here, chipset in an X series CPU, you don't lose stuff, and you can run a second M.2. Now, because on B550, I thought I was going to be restricted to the 6 ports, and it was cutting it very tight in order to do that. I bought a 2 terabyte M.2. Normally, I'd only do a 1 terabyte, because that's the minimum requirement for direct storage in Windows 11. And now I think it's like 256 gig if you want to do the AI stuff. So very minimal. Even though they say you can do it on 100 gig or something like that, you need at least 256 really if you want to use all the features. And if you want direct storage for whatever reason, they don't require Gen 4. You should have a Gen 4 realistically if you want to do direct storage, but you can get away without it. Is a terabyte. So, and because I thought I was only going to have the 1.M.2, there's a 992 terabyte in here. Because I'm just going to put it under, and this whole heatsink has to come off, which is that fan and stuff as well. I'm just going to do it once and not have to worry about it. You know what I mean? You're like, well, I need 2 terabytes. Well, gaming system. None of the storage is on here. That's in the server. But stuff does get ripped to here, and you're like, well, why do you rip local? Rip directly to server. Don't do that. Don't rip CDs directly to network storage, in my opinion. You want to save it locally, then copy it locally to the server, then delete the source. Much safer. It's an I/O thing, if you're wondering, especially when you're doing breaking, not breaking. Well, you see, I own all this stuff. If you've seen my collection and whatnot. But when you're putting it from the disk to the drives, you want direct I/O access. Let's put it that way. That is why when you're ripping CDs or whatever else you might be doing, not having a SATA one and using a USB one, if it's not done correctly, can actually just not work properly. You'll get errors, or you'll keep having to recheck, recheck. If you can get that SATA port direct access, and actually for CDs, if you got an old enough system and you can get IDE, and you have to get a Plex Store drive, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do where you can pull the raw data off, and not just PCM raw data, but raw data off. That goes way back, but let's just put it this way: internal connection much better than USB. That's why we want that here. So it afforded me a little bit of stuff. This RAM is still out of my old desktop, because I had 128 gigs in there, which is 2 quad channel sets, and basically that has 1 quad channel sits in my desktop, so half of it, that's 32 gigs, like half of 64 is in here, and half is in the repair PC dry bones. So I managed to get free RAM of 32 gigs and 64 gigs for all my computers out of my desktop's 1 RAM. Do I miss having 128 gigs when I'm editing 4K? Yes, I sure do, because I got to close everything else. Otherwise, we start really eating page file, and it gets grumpy. This is also not needed. I would be fine. Like, there's only one header. The other one goes to the back. I do use it, but like I could have done without it. But Extreme 4 gives you 2. Might as well use them both. So I go back to a rear header with the USB 3. The only ones that are not done cable management wise very well is PCIe, because originally I had a single port one in here. The 3060 Ti needs 2, and the 3080 Ti is going to need 3. This cable set is actually not the set for this. I actually have a spec 3 cable, or a set 3 cable mod spec that's like a blue set, blue and black, I think, to match the Extreme 4 board. I just haven't gotten around to getting it and installing it. Frozen Slate has my other one that matches this set. This is from the previous home theater PC that was the server, which is more of it was a Noctua Redux themed Define R5. Mooskie's running that Define R5 beautifully. Hopefully he keeps that thing just going. It's a great case. I actually kind of wish I had it for my backup server. I did buy a Define R7 though, or not R7, Define 7 non-XL for that. If I would have still had the R5, I would have just used it. But hey, we needed a case for that thing, and it was just sitting back there for months after this became the home theater PC. So, hey, pass it along. If you guys got old parts and you got friends that can use them, give them to them. Only benefits you and them, obviously. But all right, so we're gonna have to hurry up a little bit more because I want to watch anime, and there's the time. So we got our Noctua box. This is for melting heat shrink. My mini snap-on gun. I got it on clearance. I could use a heat gun, but that's cordless. So here we have the ultra chip clearance SSO 2 bearing. We do get the gaskets in here. I was gonna order some, but I have to straighten out my legs. They're falling asleep. So we're going to, remember, it's an outtake. We're going to put the gaskets on this side because it does fully seal. On the other side, we're going to get out the grills. Now, as you can see, for shipping, they actually put cardboard. That's how thin the gap is between the blade. I showed this on the D15 Gen 2. The gap between the blade is so thin that they put instead of cardboard, it's card stock between there, just so that they don't rub and break and bash and stuff like that. Noctua did also address G2, PW, and PBB. They addressed apparently there's some rattling on some D15s. You can order some, D15 Gen 2s. You can order some rubberized like pads look at that. They already put the gasket on the push side. Look at that. I don't even have to install it. So we have PPA and PPB, right? So what is the singular one? Is this a PPA or a PPB? I have to imagine they probably make equal amounts of both and just randomly put them in here, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense to make like 75% A and... Oh my gosh, this box is actually really nice. Look at that. They rolled over the edges like you're buying a $40 fan. But it'd be easier if I could fold my legs, but I can't. Okay, so this is the one that's going under the heatsink there. I'm going to move those brackets over. Is this an A or a B? Oop, almost pulled out the cardboard. I was going to say almost pulled out the concrete. Yeah, it's not concrete. This is a, gosh darn it, it's just a PWM. we'll probably be doing a build with my team leads at work. That he loved the North. He's already owns it, and he wants to do a build in it. He just ordered his the 4070 Ti that I mentioned. He ordered one. He was actually why I found it. And he ended up picking it up. He's got a North. I recommended a D15 Gen 2 and at least 2 of these in the front. If we can get 2 more of these in the top, mint. It depends on how much money he wants to spend there. But at a minimum, you know, in dual intakes in the front, one aimed at the D15 Gen 2, one aimed at the GPU. Kind of just let the case do the rest. If he wants to spend a little bit more, I'll add it as like an option. Is 2 more of these in the top and possibly a 120 in the back, just to kind of finish it out. So I'll have to know about the A and B with that as well. See, like this thing, oh, look at that. That's like, that is definitely premium. It's all rolled over. This is all one sheet. Whoever designed this packaging, very, very good, because this all goes down in the back. So it's still one sheet of cardboard. Leak flow, prevents leak, inlet spacer. Yep, I was thinking about inlet spacer, but I cannot fit it under here, right? Because it would space the fan away and actually get better stuff. That doesn't work with the clip. We are going to want to put the rubber gasket on the pole side, though, because it will be mounting flat up against the radiator. Those didn't really exist for the A14. They came out with the A12 by 25. Winglets, progressive, AAO, inner space structure, anti-vibe pads, SSO bearing, E-perf, commuter drives, smoothness, anti-vibe gasket. Where does it tell us about the differing here? Dual, plus or minus, the PP set. Yeah, but which one is the 2 fans, square frame are beneficial push-pull, 280 millimeters, 2 fans are running almost the same kind of speeds, push-pull, acoustic interaction, harmonic stuff are plus minus 25. This fine-tuning is made possible with E-perf, NEF-DIC driver, super torque. Yeah, super torque. Doesn't say anything. I know they mentioned about possibly in their video about using them in 3-fan configuration. That's effectively what we're doing here. I'm not seeing anything about 3 fans on here. I will have to stop the video and look that up momentarily. BRBRB. Oh, by the way, King Arthur showed up. He's trying to watch King Arthur James. King Arthur James. King Artie. There's literally nothing on TV. It's just the screensaver from Google. What are you doing? Alright, so we got this guy in here. Like I said, it just plugs right in there. I was going to put in these separators. What they do is they still allow you to have the grill, but they're rubber separators that keep the grill, it'll keep it quieter because it keeps it away from the front here. But I don't know if you guys saw earlier, like I have enough room for that. If we go to the 3080 Ti, it's basically going to be kissing this, and that I cannot afford. Like, as much better as that's going to be. Also, here's the thing I don't necessarily like about it. I can fit my fingies in the side there. So that means cables can go in there. So I think we're eschewing these rubber standoffs. As cool as they are. Thank you, Noctua, for implementing them. I'm sure in things where you have enough room, they're great. Right? But I am just going to go with the classic screws. They do actually include shorter ones because you only have to go through a little bit of space compared to the normal ones that are longer to go through an entire case or, you know, various other things. So, look at that kitten. Okay, we got the King Arthur being all good. What is going on, Paisley? Paisley Marie, what are you doing? You're on the keyboard. Paisley, off there. What are you doing? You're literally sleeping on the keyboard right now. You're standing on it. I heard you adjust and click keys. So we just got these mounted, but we hit low battery. So I did these the exact same way that I feel like I didn't tighten down some of these screws or something. Interesting. So there's our clearance with those. I basically need that extra room. If it even comes down to it, I may have to remove the grills. But there you go. There's the Noctua grills on here. These are much higher quality. I don't know if you can tell compared to these ones I was getting off of Amazon. These are like a PC accessory name brand. But the other thing is with the fans here, with this, because I have a splitter right there, right? So the splitter is only that long. So what you end up having to do is this fan, the B fan, goes straight into the splitter, and then you actually use an extension from this fan over here to get into the splitter cleanly. I did the exact same thing there. If you look like that, see that's where the extension ends, and then it goes to the splitter, whereas this fan just goes into the splitter directly. And yes, you're like, what? Do you tape those? No, it's actually heat shrink. So that they don't unplug themselves, because fan connectors they have a clip, but they're effectively a friction fit. Here, like it's unplugged already. You know what I mean? So, especially when routing, if I know that's going to need an extension, I have this 3-to-1. It says for USB cables. It also works fine for and what I mean by USB cables, like if I need to, often I'll heat shrink an extension onto a USB cable. Like if I can only find the cable in, like you can't find it in the length you need. That's why I like going to USB-C now. We have a lot less proprietary stuff. But you'll always need it at say like 9 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot, 15 foot. Just heat shrink the extension on. Worst case, if you break the extension on cable, you can always cut the heat shrink off. But it's not going to unplug, and it doesn't leave the residue that, unless you get adhesive heat shrink, it doesn't leave the residue that something like tape would. And if you get the 3-to-1, it goes down nice and tight around the connector like that. So what you end up having here is you don't need sticky, because it hooks over the edges of the connectors, right? So you can't pull them apart. They can't just loosen themselves up. Worst case, you could use a dot of super glue. That's going to be harder to take off than heat shrink. You can just use a lighter or a heat gun or something like that to melt it. In this case, because I didn't really want to get out the heat gun, I just use my micro torch. This is the smallest one from Snap-on. There you go. Just a little guy. Just melts it up real nice and clean there. So we are basically, if you're like, this looks exactly like you started. Yeah, that's basically the whole point. I took out 3 A14 fans over there, right? And I put in 3 A14 Gen 2s. With a kitten, a granny cat, and the boy guy is somewhere around here. I think he ran away upstairs when I told him he couldn't. He goes on his hind legs and tries to get to the TV. Watching some level 1 techs links with friends. So the next upgrade that'll happen to this won't be until I get the new card, and if I decide that goes in my desktop, which I probably will, thinking about it now. Hey, I could. The big thing is AV1. I would love to convert everything out. Like I have my DVD collection, my Blu-ray collection. All those are as ISOs. It'd be even better if I had that all encoded in AV1. And maybe we make that second GP in there, one of the Intel ones, once Battle Mage comes out. If it's relatively possible to do that. Wouldn't mind having that Intel acceleration, because remember, it's not always about raw CPU performance anymore. Let me get this buttoned. Oh, we forgot. I gotta do that. Gotta do the grill. See, 2x. You're like, oh, you said the 2-pack was better. Why didn't you get the 5? Or you said the 5-pack was better. Why didn't you get the 5-pack? I have one 200mm fan. Actually, I think I might have a second one somewhere around here, but I will at no point have 5. So even though it's a better deal if you need or will use all of them, you like say, like these are my used one. This is the garbage bin here. I'm gonna get a Ziploc bag for the screws over there to put them in there. But you know, like in the Define 7 that the backup server is going into, it's going to have 240mm intakes, one outtake, at least some fans on 2 fans on the tower cooler. Bada bing, 140mm grills. So nothing's wrong with these old ones. If I have a build, but like all of mine, the Noctua ones are just way nicer, way thicker. Like listen to that should just tell you. You know, they're just beefier. So they already announced this is the A14 Gen 2. They originally designed the A14 Gen 2 off of the A12x25, right? Well, it took them so long to develop this for the D15 Gen 2 that basically this outperforms that so substantially, they're going to make a Gen 2 version based on the A14 in the A12x25. So that fan back there, even though it's perfectly fine, will get replaced once that exists. Like in my desktop, I'm not going to replace them, but in here where there's just one, and you know, I'm kind of keeping this up to date as we go. I will upgrade it there, and you know, maybe that's when I can throw in Chibi PC if I don't get around to upgrading the fans in there right away, because it's perfectly fine, nice and clean. I just blew it off. Properly filter things, guys, and I don't know where that filter blew to, but I have like magnetic filters, and things clean off. Like, look, that fan looks fresh, brand stinking new. So something to keep in mind. Yes, it does lower airflow, but if you have fuzzy things like this, it's highly recommended. Makes it way easier to deal with in the long run. All right, so double checked. We're all set up and going. We only hit 84 under a quick AVX test, 75 under SSE. I would have to do additional testing, like the 30-minute Cinebench test, and check it 10 minutes to see if we've dropped clocks. Like you check your clock speed initially when it starts, and you check after 10 minutes to see if it's dropped once it's heat soaked. Now, generally the air coolers heat soak way faster. One thing I did look at if I need an additional room is this front of the case is pretty thick here, right? Might be able to put the 140s in the front on the outside if I have to. Obviously, I wouldn't need to rewire them. I would just flip the gasket to the other side, and then I'd actually put the grill on the inside of the case, especially if the GPU is going to be getting that close to it. That might be something that I may look into if that 3080 Ti, because I think this is where the 3080 Ti is going to go. Really don't need the 4070 Ti over here necessarily. There's not much AV1 decoding going on, and compute-wise, they're pretty similar. Newer stuff, 4070 Ti is better. Older stuff, 3080 Ti actually has more CUDA cores, so it actually crunches better. Then it's like, oh, what if I just leave it in the desktop and I put that here? That's another option, you know, because I can always do the AV1 decoding here. So something to think about there. It was just too good of a deal to pass up. $800 card for like $640, I think it was. Now, yes, I know there's a 4070 Ti Super now, which is now $800, but that means the 4070 Ti is not available anymore. And then the gap between the 4070 and the 4070 Ti Super is massive. And sadly, the 4070 Super, if I recall, is not a worse 4070 Ti, because a 4070 Ti is already, that was supposed to be the 4080, like the worst 4080, right? So it's the 4070 Super is not a worse 4070 Ti. It's like a better 4070, and that's why the 4070 Ti was in a good margin there. Is it's actually on the core of the 4080. That's where you get a lot of the benefits. That's why your 3060 Ti was a banger and your 3060 was a downer. I ran both. There's a reason why there's a 3060 Ti in there right now. Also, you need the 3060 to have new enough HDMI and tech in order to push 4K 120. That's why this got upgraded to the 30 series. So realistically in here, I don't need anything newer than 30 series. Don't really need anything newer than 30 series on my desktop too. But looking at the benchmarks, except for these, especially for these newer games coming out, or frame gen, I could play 4K 240 if I could push it, right? Like I said, I'm good at 100 is my minimum nowadays, right? I aim for more than 120, right? Like 130, 135 plus. Just because if, like, say if when I had my 144 hertz panel, if you get too close to that, you get kind of weird. Like, you almost don't want too many frames, if that makes sense. You run into other issues there. And I'm not saying this for competitive gaming sense, because then you want as many frames as you can get no matter what display you have. But from an experience, like if you don't want tearing and you don't want stuttering, you don't want both those things, and you want to stay within your VRR range, or your variable refresh rate range, or your FreeSync range, G-Sync range. And you're trying to push, like, you're only using FreeSync, G-Sync anyway because you're trying to get better quality with matching the frame rates, whereas here we have 120 max, right? Not that we need more, but see, that's where the 4070 Ti with its frame gen makes more sense, and we only need a 30 series here. We had a 3060, but that didn't cut it. It really didn't. And yes, we are at the desktop, even though there's no desktop, because when you're running OLED, you either want a black background or you want a cycling one, because you don't want it to be static. So on the home theater PC, I just go black with transparent taskbar. On the desktop, I have a folder of artwork that cycles through. So tested that out. The fans ramped, they ran, etc. May revisit it if I have to for clearance issues. You can even see they even bulge out the mesh a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually intend for you to put fans on the outside potentially. The two 140s in the front of this XB, this is like the XB Evo, those were added because they added a tempered glass thing in the top rather than the fan. Probably because until Noctua came out with that 200, they haven't been common since like early mid 2000s. But that's how I'm running it. So we kind of went over what my airflow is, why it's that way. Theoretically too, it should be cleaner pulling air in from the back rather than the front, because it's not getting dusty back there. It's covered, etc. Whereas all the filth and cats are out here. It was pretty clean, and most of it just blew off with there. There wasn't any substantial dust. Some of it on the sides I wiped off, but any of the stuff on the fans, on the components, just it went right off. That is what you want. So I'm happy with this. This thing does need a major BIOS update. A bunch of chipset drivers, all that sort of stuff updated in it, especially if it's getting that new GPU. Or not a new one, it's another machine. But yeah, if we're hopscotching these cards around. So, and if we're dumping 3060 Ti to 3080 Ti, probably going to need those fans for that additional cooling as well. Since we're going to be dumping a lot more watts in there, I should probably double check which power supply is in there. Should at least have an 850 for a 3080 Ti. To be truthful, you probably want 1000 watt if you've got it. Now, all of mine and all my systems are 850. There's actually one right here, so if I can get warrantied out, I still have to send it out. Still haven't need to. And like if that's a 650 in there, which it might be because that's all it's really needed for a 3060 Ti or previously a 2060 with a 2600. You know, like that doesn't need a ton. I know the repair PC is using a 650 watt. So we'll have to see, you know, what's what, and poke around in there. I may need to do some. Nice thing is I use all Seasonic. Seasonic's never swapped their modular cables. So when they're like, oh, don't, you know, blah, blah, blah. No, Seasonic's good. So what I can do, and I've done this when power supply is like, say if this thing's really important and the server is even more important, if that goes out, you just, I have an extra one, and it's just a Seasonic, right? You just swap it in. I actually have an extra one, which is my fanless one, which is like 620 watt. Most things it'll power might be right on the inch, but usually those fanless have a lot of overhead on them. So I can just swap it in, just unplug all the modular cables, put a Seasonic there, plug it on the modular cables, done. So I definitely want to make sure it's got at least an 850 out there once I get out the 3080 Ti. But I believe the server's got one. That's the one from the server that died, and I just bought another one because the only extra I had on hand was in use as well, because a lot of hardware died around the same time. So that may have to RMA before we do stuff if it's only got a 650. Otherwise, I think Chibi PC has an 850. It's my little ITX rig. I might be able to swap there or something. That's a pretty easy one to do. Oh no, it doesn't. It's got SFX now. So there might be another power supply hanging around here someplace as well. So let me know what you guys think. I've got the D15 Gen 2 now in the ITX rig. Fills up the whole case. Even gotta swap that front fan, sadly. At least if I want to get the side panel back on, which I do. And then we've got 3 of the new A14s in the home theater PC. Now, I have A14s, 3 of them in dry bones down here. Because I sealed off the top of this. This is a 750D. Yeah, predates the 5000 series, or even 7000 series. You know, they're based off of 750, 350. I think there's a 450 as well, and that was less popular. And those are all based on the OG 900, which you've probably seen on some of Jay's 2 Cents older videos. Love my 750. I've modified it many times. It is happy down there. I got a bunch of 5 1/4 inch bays, which is great for diagnostics and discs popping in, like hard drives or SATA SSDs in hard drive carriers, stuff like that. Super handy. That will probably never change. It even used to be the home theater PC prior to the Define R5, so it's sound dampened as well. That's why normally it would have a window. I bought a second solid panel on there. And at some point they did make a Type-C front header. It's installed in there. So like 0, like I mean, they just brought back that case effectively. 4000D, it's worse than that. 5000D, better. That's why Frozen Slate got that for his build. So in there I do have A14s. No reason to change that though, because that thing's got an all-in cooler. It is happy. It is hunky-dory. The only reason we upgraded the home theater PC is I'm going for as silent as I can. It does end up having a little bit of load when everything's hitting it really hard. And it was just on the edge. And talking with Noctua, the new fans do make that much of a difference. They can take that edge off that I was running into with the 5800X3D in there, where it was just dipping that one boost pin and causing frame stutter. Not like really bad stuttering, but like inconsistency. Remember that X3D does not like power fluctuation. It doesn't like any fluctuation. So if you can take that out of there, and yes, the fix there would be like a 120 millimeter AIO, not enough. You go to a 240 or 280 home theater PC, do not want that there. You saw how I have it set up. So see, this is what you can do once you have a specific purpose for a build. In this case, a slightly lower end chip was better. You know, slightly better fans are worth the money. You can't always build price to performance if you have a intended use case, right? you build to that, and that may actually be like price inefficient. But if that's how you're going to use it, you keep that in mind. Usually those builds are over the $1,200, which is basically kind of like a $1,200 minimum. That's your 8-core, 32 gigs, terabyte boot SSD with an NVIDIA graphics card. So that'd be a 4060 now. That's like $1,200 right there. Yeah, that could fit in there, but you're not going to get that case. You're not going to get that cooling for the price. You're exceeding kind of like the minimum build price in order to do something like that. In my case, I did over time and I built it up. But a lot of that stuff, as I went over, like how I upgraded the CPU, how did it get a better CPU? Well, I knew the X3D was coming, and I had a 2600. We're going to do that. Well, we don't need the 26 better than a 2600 when we have a 2060 in there, right? So I don't need it until I get a 30 series card. I don't need the 30 series card until I buy a new TV that needs more than 60 hertz 4K. You know, before I can do that, I need a new receiver that can do 4K 120. So it's kind of like a, you know, then that buys me time where I upgrade something else, I can pass something else down, etc. You know what I mean? You don't have to. I mean, if anything, keep that bad boy up to date in your server if you've got one, or even this can trickle down to your server, then can trickle down to your home theater PC, which can then trickle down to your repair PC. That's effectively how I do it. Back when the home theater PC was my home theater PC and server, which it's way nice to have a dedicated one. It just goes to sleep. I press the button, turns on, ready to go, and the server's always on then, not making noise next to my head, next to my TV. But back then it was build the desktop. The old desktop hardware is the home theater PC / server, and the old desktop hardware is the repair PC. That's how I did it. And a lot of times that's enough. You know what I mean? Now we're looking at where I'm actually a gen now 2 behind, right? I'm running Zen 3 on everything. And that is because literally all of my stuff was X. I had my X99, my X79, my X58, right? I didn't go to X299 because there was no benefit for me over X99. Then I waited so long, was planning on Threadripper 5000, and it never came. Pro came through Lenovo, but not until much later could you actually do it yourself. And I had that as a perfect upgrade. Like I could have just slotted it into my old system. And then we ended up with just RMA City. Remember guys, the only thing in here that either wasn't a carryover from the old build, which would be the 3080 Ti and the SSDs. And I actually bought the SSDs knowing I would carry them over, right? As well, and then the only thing I bought was the 5950X. Every other part of that was either carryover, and most of it was actually RMA replacements. So that is why you're like, oh, why did you build a 5000 series build when 7000 is out? Because I had everything but the CPU. I had 64 gigs of DDR4. Yeah, it's only 3200 when it could have done 3600, but I already had it. You know, why'd you use 3080 Ti when 40 series is just on the horizon? Well, I already had it. It was planning to be water cooled, and it was ready to go in another build till that completely crapped out, etc. The list goes on and on and on like that. So now I did end up buying, that's a Fractal Pop, and I did buy some Chromax Noctuas in it, right? And then I put on Fantex Halos. That's the LEDs. So it looks a lot, very close to stock in my opinion, except it's like stock plus. You know, they're aftermarket, but it's made to look stock. Now, if this GPU goes into home theater PC, I'm gonna have to figure out how to turn off that LED. I think I have to use Precision X to get the LED controller. That's how I've set it orange. It does remember though, as you can see, it's still orange. I only set it orange once. So it does look clean, doesn't it though? So that is something, and I saw the pop and I'm like, it will exactly fit everything, and it exactly, oh, for those wondering, another under here, we got a hard drive hot swap bay and another 4K Blu-ray drive for ripping. So some pretty hefty stuff is all crammed in, which at least for me is like literally the perfect case. I went from a case labs down to this, and I'm happier here. Am I gonna get rid of the case labs? No. One day I'll want to do water cooling, and you'll never be able to own the case labs again unless you buy it used. So mine isn't going anywhere. I did sell off all my extra parts, and the guy that got them is very happy about it. Hopefully they come back kicking and fighting, because I'd love to. Supposedly it's going to be more parts for their old cases, which is weird, kind of in my opinion. But so that is kind of what you can do. You're not going to do any of this with any of these by doing it out. You can do it outright. You know what I mean? But be aware that's not the easy way, and it's the expensive way. Whereas if you already have these parts, pass it along, and you kind of upgrade as you go. Don't get rid of your old build just because you built the new one, and keep your current build up to date. You know what I mean? If you upgrade your graphics card, unless you have a buddy you can sell it to, just pass it down a system. You can make use of it there as a transcoding server, as a home theater PC, as, say, if you're in high school, college, maybe your buddies don't have a system to use. They can use that when they're there. Maybe that gets them into PC gaming. Then you got more people to game with. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of stuff you can kind of do. Throw your comments down below on that. But and this is my perfect build, right? For some of you, you're like, I don't want a near dead silent tiny little box that's got a crap ton of hardware cabinet for its size. You want something else. The one thing I will say is, if you think PC building is a hobby, water cooling that's its own beast. Even a PC, you're gonna get your new hardware and expect to use it that day. Don't. You may get planning done, or it's physically together. It will not be usable. If you rush it, you're gonna run into stuff. Like, I've built systems at LAN parties. That becomes a LAN party. Not for me, like, I didn't build them, but like, people are like, oh, since you're all here and you guys know stuff, let's build it. And that becomes the bulk of the LAN party, is building it and getting it working. And everybody's interested too, because it's usually new hardware. Take your time, test your hardware before you use it. It really sucks to have a build like this, and like, you've planned it out immaculately, you want to put it together, you want to do it, and it just turns out that you get bad stuff. Now, you might get bad stuff, but test it, bench test it. Toss memory in another system if you have one before you stick it in this system. You'll bench test, mem test it. Do pre-clear on your storage drives before they go in this system. You want to basically, new hardware is bad so often out of the gate that you want to get a yes, it's good, not no, it's not bad. You know what I mean? Like, you want that positive, not the it hasn't failed yet. You want the yes, it has passed testing. And even then, sometimes you still run into issues. But and for water cooling, start with known working hardware. Ideally, like, I have an extra computer case. It's an Antec 300 from Squares. I build part of Shane's build in that. Right, I just threw a stock cooler on it, threw a graphics card I had around here, let it run through benchmarks. Then we know the CPU, motherboard, RAM are good, etc. Especially if you're buying it piecemeal. Don't especially buy your RAM before your motherboard and CPU. Unless you have an existing way to test it, or a buddy of yours can throw it in and run mem test, because otherwise those are not core components. There's no way to test them in any way separately from each other. So it's and I know a lot of you won't like that, but like, oh, I can only afford this part. Just save it all up, put it in your separate savings account or something, then, or you know what I mean? Because you're unless you're doing stuff like I did here, where like, I knew my boot and my edit SSD could go from my old build to this one. Unless you're doing stuff like that, then you can use it. Right, I have done it quite often, where I buy something with an intent to use it once I get something else, and it just never happens, or 2 years go by, it's still sitting there in the box. Well, why'd you buy it in the first place? You know what I mean? So unless you can use it now, wait. The price is probably going down. Like, unless you see some screaming deal, and like there's literally market stuff coming out saying like SSDs, the price has actually been going up, not down. Like 2 terabytes used to be under $100. Now they're at like 110. Now it's not horrible by any means. But 1 terabytes now they're basically, they only go as low as 80. They used to go much cheaper, at least for the drives I'm talking about, like Samsung 980s, 990s, stuff like that. So if you know like a market uptick is coming, maybe buy it. But like there's some like that you can stick in any. You can even stick it in a laptop and check it out, right? Inside of a laptop, here's one that's partially pulled apart to get a drive put in right now. There she is, pulled apart. You can toss an M.2 in there, or a fan. You can even plug into an extra power supply you have and just plug it right into the power supply to test it. Stuff like that, or LED strips too, or graphics card. Stick it in your current system. Even if you got to be a bit ghetto about it and run a second power supply externally. I've done it before. I've done it internally. By the way, avoid that. Naughty. If you're having draw issues on your power supply, like I had my 1,000 watt, one of my 1,000 watts was anytime it pulled over 800 watts, it would you'd droop significantly. So I just popped another one in there, so it never did that. I mean, didn't have issues. But the correct fix was go buy a bigger power supply, 1,300 watt. Then I didn't have any issues. And it wasn't in this system; it was the previous one, which had dual GPUs. Blah 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 blah. Super heavy overclock on the X99 CPU, 6900K. It was never off of 90C. It was happy there. The cooling held it stable, So for those saying like, oh, I always want my CPU cooler than that. Hey, if that's what gets you your overclock, it's fine being there. It's just going to degrade faster, but once it goes to live in the repair PC, it's probably fine. All right, guys. Hopefully all this information was useful. If this is something I should cut up, or you have any questions on any of the products I've featured, and any of the ideas I've tried to convey, let me know down below. See you next one. Peace.